Welcome to Australia, Larry.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us where you've come from and the path you've travelled.
Actually, I grew up outside of Seattle, Washington, far west coast. Decided at graduation I needed to get out of the sticks. I went to Los Angeles, got an undergraduate degree at Occidental College. And so this is 1973 when I graduated.
Just yesterday.
Just yesterday. Absolutely. It seems like not. And so I went off to SUNY Stony Brook to study, to get a PhD in economics. I was there for a year, and several key professors left, and I had, I suppose, in some sense, distinguished myself there, and decided I wanted to transfer. I transferred to Northwestern University in Chicago, and that's where I ended up getting my PhD in managerial economics.
So what did they teach you in the early 70s in economics? And how does it look different to what they're teaching now?
I remember taking a course at SUNY Stony Brook I don't remember what the course was titled, but I remember what we did was read all 3 volumes of Das Kapital.
Right.
And
Wow.
That actually was a very, very interesting thing to do. You know, so I was probably a communist until I got to be about 25 or so. And then got weaned off of that. But otherwise, economics wasn't different. I mean, it was still the basics.
So how did you go from reading Das Kapital to such a quantitative outlook on the field?
What happened when I was at Northwestern, I ended up hooking up with a engineering professor in the engineering school. Erhan Chinlar was his name, and his area was stochastic processes. And I took the first basic course in stochastic processes from him, and that was, I think it was 3 quarter courses. I said, this is just fabulous. I've found what I love. I still liked economics, but I loved the quantitative aspect of stochastic processes. I ended up taking 4 more courses from him before I graduated, and so that's where it came from. I mean, I should say, at Kellogg at the time, there were some economists who were known for mathematical
Quantitative
stuff,
approach, yeah.
sort of general equilibrium theorists, and so I like that sort of. But I got really intrigued with stochastic processes, and that, particularly at the time, fit quite well with thinking about financial markets.
Okay, so we've arrived in economics, and you're trained at an outstanding school in economics. How did we then move to finance? How did we find our way to markets and finance?
I think it was that my love of stochastic processes, and that it was at a time in which people were starting to thinking about derivative pricing. It started earlier than that, but that was a major area of interest at the time. I decided that wasn't my interest, but I did think that financial markets were really fascinating. In particular, at the time, a standard model in economics was a rational expectations equilibrium model. And this is Stiglitz and others were writing these models about how private information got to be into prices. And these models made my head swim. And I decided, you know what? I want to find out how these markets actually work and think about constructing a model of how those markets work. And that's what I did in my dissertation. Now, my dissertation has never seen the light of day, which is just as well. In the process of doing the dissertation, what I did was an awful lot of reading about the actual institutions in the markets. And so that then informed my subsequent work with Paul Milgram, where we got into more seriously modeling the price formation process.
So how did the relationship with Paul come about? Because it resulted in some beautiful work.
I finished up my dissertation and understand that I had gone from being an undergraduate at Occidental to a graduate student, first at Stony Brook and then a graduate student at Kellogg. And I said, I haven't done anything real yet. And so I got my degree. I looked for an academic job. I wasn't satisfied with the ones I got. And so I thought, no, I'm going to go do something real for a while. Well, it wasn't exactly real. It was economic consulting with DRI. Okay. It was close to real. And so my wife and I moved to Boston, Lexington, Massachusetts, where DRI was, and worked there for a year. And then for a variety of reasons, decided, no, I wanted to go back and try academia. But I at least had done something real for a year. And so that's when I came back to Kellogg. Paul Milgram had joined Kellogg the year before. And it was basically through John Roberts, who had been my advisor, not someone the least bit interested in financial markets. He's, Milgram Roberts is much more known as sort of industrial organization kinds of stuff. Paul and I and another couple of people became pretty good friends.
So I know what I regard as your biggest contribution to the field, but what do you think is your biggest contribution to the field in your eyes?
Pete's paper has an elegance that is just wonderful. And I should say that we subsequently found out later in a paper that came out in about 2000 that, no, actually on a very deep mathematical level, Pete and I were talking about exactly the same thing, though using different specific language, specific mathematics, but we were talking about the same thing. I have a model which can be explained in very simple terms to even MBAs, I think was the way it was characterized then. I teach a joint law business school course in capital market regulation, and this is I teach them our model because the intuition is very simple. I can hold the mathematics to a bare minimum, just do a little bit of arithmetic, and the idea on the one hand that people providing liquidity have to be afraid of people with private information is an important one.
I couldn't agree with you more, actually, now that I think about it. As a grad student, I was set, obviously, both your paper, Glosten, Milgram, and Kyle. Yours was very intuitive, and it was a nice piece of work.
Thank you.
You have a marvellous model that describes the mechanics of how information works and the bid and offer. What kind of regulatory issues do you think we currently face that are the most significant?
Certainly the paper that I wrote primarily had to do with equity markets. And it is the stock market where these informational problems are potentially the greatest. And I have to say, what problems we may have in the equity markets are not very serious. I look at the equity markets in the US, I look at the equity markets in Australia, I look at the equity markets around the world, certainly in developed countries. And I have to say, those markets work pretty well. Some fair amount of high-frequency trading is in fact just plain old market making.
But done very quickly.
Actually, it is done as fast as other people want to trade with them.
Sure. Okay.
Now, what they do quickly is they put in quotes, they change quotes, they cancel quotes. That they do very rapidly. They trade at exactly the frequency that other people want to trade with them. So actually, some of my colleagues say this should be called low latency trading, not necessarily high frequency trading. So they are in the business of providing liquidity. Are HFT different? Yes and no. On the no part, they really are just in the business of providing liquidity. They're the NASDAQ dealers, they're the New York Stock Exchange specialists, except without the benefits that the exchanges conferred on the NASDAQ dealers and the New York Stock Exchange specialists. They actually have a more difficult time in the job of providing liquidity. On the other hand, they have technology that probably makes it easier for them to provide liquidity. Because they're fast, they are the natural liquidity suppliers. They can react to signals as fast or faster than anyone else. That means they can better protect themselves from being traded by being attacked by people with private information. That makes high-frequency traders sound completely benign, and I would say that for someone like Virtu Financial or Sun Trading, that is probably a fair characterization of what they do. We know that there are other types of high-frequency traders who are not nearly so benign, that use strategies that come close to looking a lot like manipulative strategies. They end up taxing the rest of the investing public. So, are there some regulatory challenges there? There certainly are. My inclination is to say we don't regulate anything out of business. One of the problems is we don't know now the extent to which there are the predatory high-frequency traders and there are the benign market-making high-frequency traders. And it may be different in different places in the world. I mean, I've been struck by the fact that who knows if these statistics are correct, but high-frequency traders are allegedly around 50% of the volume in the US. I've heard something like 20% in Australia. Why are there much fewer here? I don't know. I know Virtu Financial makes a market in the US. I know they make a market in Australia. So there's some commonality there.
Let's say the local regulator could switch off high-frequency trading tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Is the market tomorrow morning going to be a better or worse one?
On balance, I think it's going to be a worse one.
Why?
Based on the academic work we have to date, which is and very imperfect. When they're around, spreads are narrower, volatility is smaller. There's sort of less spurious volatility.
We had the CEO of the ASX say that they were going to cut the pipes to shut down high-frequency trading. That would be a good thing. If it was possible to do it, it sounds to me like you're saying the market would be worse off for it.
Markets are pretty resilient, and this is where it comes down to, well, what do you mean by high-frequency trading? In the sense that would we typically think of Goldman Sachs as a high-frequency trader? No, I don't think we do. Do they have algorithms that help people get their transactions done? They do. Do we imagine that those algorithms might be modified to provide the market-making activity that the market seems to demand? That these, not always, but the market seems to like the existence of these intermediaries who stand ready to buy at the bid and sell at the offer. That seems to be a valuable service. We take away the high-frequency traders, someone else will do it. Will they do it as well? I guess what I'm suggesting is a guarded no, they won't do it as well. But again, the market's pretty resilient.
Yeah. What do you regard as the most important paper you've written?
Importance being a multi-dimensioned character. I mean, look, we've already talked about Glosten, Milgram, and other people have used that, the insights of that, but I still continue to use the insight from that. But I think there are some other things that I've written that I sort of like. I have one paper called The Inevitability of the Electronic Open Limit Order Book. I remember I received a call from a colleague down in Texas 5 or so years ago, and he had, for some reason, went back to look at that paper for some reason. And he had sort of looked around the world and said, all we have are electronic open limit order books. Boy, talk about an empirical confirmation of a paper.
Not when you wrote it.
Not when I wrote it. But there's some other insights that I use from that paper. Glosten Milgram is about the difference between the bid and the offer. I also have one paper that actually has the most Google sites, more Google sites than any other paper. So the paper with Runkle Jagannathan and myself, it had, I guess, some interesting novel empirical specification. And our model is now part of all the standard statistical packages, Stata and SAS and all those. So that's why it's more cited.
Close your eyes and imagine what the world will look like in 20 years. What will the global equity markets look like in 25 years' time? What will they look like? What's the next big call? What's the next? Technology is important.
Technology is important. I would guess, and
we're guessing.
The foundations of Bitcoin is a computational procedure about which I know nothing, except to know that it is a way to settle accounts immediately, anonymously.
Okay.
We have a very large clearing and settlement system within the US, as they do in every other country. We could, with this computing methodology, do T+0 clearing and settlement.
Real-time settlement.
real-time settlement, that there's a transaction on an exchange, this distributed computing, or whatever it's called, could then immediately match up those two individuals, manage the transaction of coin and shares, and we wouldn't need any of the other mechanisms. Will that happen? I think it could. 20 years? Yeah, it could.
The technology probably already exists.
Yeah.
But it's a question of regulation, I presume. Is that?
Actually, no, somewhat less about the clearing and settlement regulation.
We're speculating.
Yeah, we're speculating. I do know that NASDAQ has announced that they have a brand new market for sort of newly developing companies. They keep trying this over and over, and they're trying it again. And they have said that they're going to experiment with this sort of computing methodology for immediate clearing and settlement.
Will that exchange look better? Will it provide? Does what happened in the back office? Because this is really a back office issue.
Back office stuff.
Will that make the quality of markets better?
I'm not sure that it will make the quality of the markets, the prices we see, I don't think that those will be any better. I don't think that will change. I think this is a matter of efficiency. If we can make the whole transaction occur for less cost, that means lower brokerage commissions, that means fewer clearing fees and such, and so that can all be made more efficient.
So that could affect prices.
It could affect prices, yeah.
Yeah. Larry, thank you very much for giving us your time, and
pleasure.
Hopefully you'll enjoy the remainder of your stay in Australia, and we look forward to seeing you here again sooner rather than later.
I thank you very much.